Mark was already yelling at me when I realized I couldn't see the trail anymore. I had only stepped a few feet to the left. That's what I keep replaying in my head. It wasn't reckless. I wasn't wandering off for fun. I just thought I saw something odd between the trees and took a few steps to get a clearer look. I expected to turn back and see the path exactly where it had been. It wasn't. There were trees behind me, just trees. No visible opening, no obvious direction where the trail cut through. Mark grabbed my shoulder and pulled me around in a slow circle, telling me to stop moving for a second. His voice was controlled. That scared me more than if he'd been shouting. We both tried to retrace the few steps I had taken, but the ground looked uniform. Leaves, roots, patches of exposed dirt. Nothing that marked a clear edge where the path had been. The strangest part was how quickly it had disappeared. We had been walking a clearly marked loop, wide enough for two people to walk side by side. I had stepped off maybe 3 steps, maybe 4. It shouldn't have swallowed the trail. I started breathing too fast. I could hear it in my ears. Mark told me to slow down and look for the blaze markers on the trees, the white paint that indicated the route. We scanned in every direction. None of the trees near us had markings. That didn't make sense. We had been on a maintained trail. He said we must have angled farther than we thought. He took out his phone to check the map, but the signal was weak and the GPS dot wasn't moving properly. It hovered and jittered without settling. The woods didn't feel wrong. There was no sudden silence. That would have almost been easier. Instead, everything felt normal in a way that made the wrongness harder to identify. Birds were calling. Wind was moving branches. The forest looked exactly like it had 10 minutes earlier. Except the path was gone. We started walking slowly in the direction we believed we had come from. After about 30 seconds, we both stopped again at the same time. The trees ahead looked familiar. Too familiar. I recognized a split trunk with a jagged scar about chest height. I had noticed it earlier because it looked like something had clawed it. I remembered thinking it was odd. We were standing in front of it again. Mark didn't speak for a long moment. He walked up to the tree and touched the scar, as if confirming it was real. "We passed this already," he said quietly. I felt my stomach drop. We turned around and walked in the opposite direction, more deliberately this time, counting steps under our breath. I got to 132 before we stopped again. The same split trunk stood ahead of us. That's when fear hit hard. My legs felt weak in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. It was a draining sensation, like the energy had dropped out of my body all at once. Mark swore under his breath and forced himself to keep his tone steady, telling me that loops can happen if you drift slightly without realizing it. But we hadn't been wandering aimlessly. We had been walking straight lines. Then I noticed something that made it worse. The spacing between the trees felt tighter than before. The gaps between trunks were narrower. The forest behind the first row of trees looked denser, almost layered. I blinked hard and told myself I was imagining it. Mark said, almost to himself, "This is why they say not to step off." I knew what he meant. Before we had left that morning, his uncle had mentioned something that sounded ridiculous at the time. He said that in certain parts of the woods, the trail is safe, but the forest doesn't always want you in it. He said, if you lose sight of the path, you don't wander to look for it. You stand still and find it. You don't keep moving deeper. We hadn't stood still. We had tried to solve it by moving. I felt a rising panic that was difficult to control. My thoughts started racing ahead to possibilities I didn't want to consider. Getting stuck overnight, wandering farther without realizing it, exhaustion setting in. Mark told me to stop thinking and listen. We both stood completely still. For a moment, everything seemed ordinary. Then I realized something was missing. There was no variation in sound. The birds were calling, but in the same rhythm. The wind was moving, but the leaves closest to us weren't shifting with it. It is like the forest was playing a recording of itself instead of actually existing around us. I said that out loud, without meaning to. Mark didn't laugh. He said, "Don't look too far." I didn't understand what he meant until I tried focusing deeper between the trees. The farther I let my eyes travel, the less depth there seemed to be. The forest didn't open up into layers anymore. It looked flat beyond a certain point, like a backdrop. That was when something inside me started to break. It wasn't terror in the screaming sense. It was the realization that the space around us wasn't behaving the way physical space should. And if space can't be trusted, you have nothing stable to orient yourself with. Mark told me we were going to do exactly what the rules said, even though we were already off the path. We were going to stop moving completely and wait. Waiting felt unbearable. Every instinct told me to keep walking, to find something recognizable, to force the situation to resolve through action. Standing still felt like surrender. We waited. I don't know how long. Time didn't feel consistent. At some point, I heard something that snapped my focus back sharply. A branch cracking. We both turned toward the sound. Through a narrow gap between trunks, I thought I saw something shift. Not an animal, not clearly human. Just movement that didn't match the rhythm of the forest. My throat felt tight. My mouth was dry. Mark whispered, "Don't move." I hadn't realized I had taken half a step in that direction. The movement stopped. Everything held. Then, without warning, I saw white paint on a tree about 10 yards to our right. A trail marker, but it hadn't been there before. I am certain of that. Mark saw it too. He didn't question it. He just grabbed my arm and moved toward it quickly. As we stepped closer, the forest seemed to regain depth. The spaces between trees looked natural again. The layering returned. Sound felt uneven and real instead of patterned. We reached the marked tree and followed the direction of the blaze. Within a minute, the main trail opened up ahead of us, wide and clear. The shift was immediate. The forest looked normal. It felt normal. We didn't stop walking until we reached the parking lot. Even now, what unsettles me isn't that we got lost. It's how quickly the environment changed when we left the trail, and how quickly it corrected when we found it again. It felt less like wandering in the woods and more like stepping into something that was adjusting around us. And the worst part is knowing that if we had kept trying to walk our way out instead of standing still, I don't know how far that distortion would have gone. Thanks for watching No Sleep Tonight, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps this channel grow. And if you want more unsettling stories, there are 2 more waiting for you on the screen right now. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, sleep well.